I got to confess, I wasn't sure what to expect out of the New Orleans Saints heading into 2019. As you talk about after the 2017 season, you got into the playoffs, you had the Minneapolis Miracle. Then 2018 season, NFC Championship game at home. The screw job, Nickel Roby Coleman, is not called for pass interference when it was so clear and so obvious that it should have been. Like, that's the discussion. That's the narrative. And you look at a team like the Saints with Drew Brees at the tail end of his career, 2 straight years of really heartbreaking, disappointing playoff losses, and you sit there and you wonder and think to yourself, like, how is this team going to be able to respond? Like, at some point in time, you have to venture a guess that either bad luck's going to catch up to them or the bad mojo of the past couple of seasons is going to take over that team. And even with Breeze back for another season, it's like, how much can they really overcome? And when you got to the season, and I believe it was week 2, wasn't it? Drew Brees goes down with the arm injury, the elbow injury, or a thumb injury, sorry, in the loss to the Rams. Like, you sit there right there at that moment, and you wonder, like, maybe some of the good mojo is left, and all the bad mojo is going to take over for the New Orleans Saints. Then they come right back. Teddy Bridgewater takes over. They win their next 5 games with him as the starting quarterback. So it's like, you have all these reasons that the Saints could potentially fold like a house of cards. Like, they can quit. They could move on to next year. They could give up on this season. They could be disappointed. They could be down to the dumps. And instead, they figured out a way to get it done behind the backup quarterback until their future first ballot Hall of Famer, Drew Brees, was going to be able to come back from injury. And when he did, the Saints pretty much just kept right on rolling. It certainly helped with Michael Thomas having his historic season. Most receptions ever, 149 of them, as a matter of fact. On the defensive side of the ball, Demario Davis was outstanding. Cameron Jordan had 15 and a half sacks. The defense was pretty stout against the run. Like, this was a good team. This is a good team. And in some ways, it feels like it was inherently unfair the way all of this played out is the fact that a 13-3 team like the New Orleans Saints only ended up as a 3 seed. So not only did they not get a first-round bye or home field advantage throughout the playoffs, they had to play on the wild card weekend. Yes, it was a home game, but they were 13-3. Talk about bad luck and bad timing to have a season where you go 13-3 and it's not going to matter. And what you can really point to as those key seminal moments in the Saints season, the loss to Atlanta, that bad loss to Atlanta in the middle of the year, as Atlanta's season was already at that point in time done. Like, if the Saints don't blow that game to the level that they did and they win that, they're 14-2. Number 1 seed, whole dynamic of everything changes. Or potentially if they hold on to beat the 49ers and they don't let George Kittle make that late catch to get the 49ers in the field goal range. Now you're talking about a 49ers team that very well may not make the Super Bowl because they have to play on wild card weekend. And the Saints have got home field advantage throughout the playoffs. Like, sometimes even for these teams that are 13-3, 12-4, it is amazing how much one game, one moment in time in the course of a season can change everything. And in part, it was bad luck for the Saints because they faced a team in the Vikings that they did not match up all that particularly well against. And I've talked about it before with the recap of this game. It was not a great matchup for them, sure. And there are plenty of reasons why they lost. Absolutely. But one of the reasons that you put in the pass interference review rule was to be able to review instances where pass interference could have been potentially called or should have been potentially called. And the fact that not only was Kyle Rudolph not flagged for offensive pass interference in overtime, but that the play was not actually given its due as a review is absolutely astoundingly stupid. If you're going to have the rule, then use it. If you're not going to use it, then don't have the rule. Like, it was just mind-numbingly bad. And you look at this for the Saints, especially if you're a Saints fan, like, how many times can the Saints have this happen? If it's not one thing, it's another. It's like last year you were screwed because defensive pass interference wasn't called when it clearly should have been. This go around, You have an argument that offensive pass interference could have been called, maybe should have been called, ultimately wasn't called, even though there's a rule specifically put in place to prevent against inconsistent circumstances and situations like this. I give you the Saints. You got to sit there and look like, does it even matter anymore? Why would you even bother? It's a fair question. Because it's a third straight year of a heartbreaking playoff loss. And as heartbreaking as last season's was, I almost wonder if this season's was worse because this was a 13-3 team. It was in the wild card weekend against a Vikings team. And there was supposed to be a rule in place to help protect you for situations like this. And it didn't get utilized. Just astoundingly bad. So now the New Orleans Saints are going to go into yet another offseason after yet another disappointing, heartbreaking, last-second playoff loss and wondering what's next for them. And you look, what's Drew Brees going to do? You would assume he's going to be back again, but you just never know. But you would assume if he's going to play anywhere in the NFL in 2020, it's going to be in New Orleans, and that would make some sense. Like, to me, Drew Brees is one of those guys. He has meant so much to that franchise for so long. I've said it before, and I will repeat it again. He's been there 14 years. He's led you to the playoffs numerous times, Super Bowl champion, set all these records, made your organization more relevant than it ever has been or ever will be after he's gone. It is one of those things that you just have to ride out the wave with him however much longer he wants to play, period. Like, you can't move on from him. You just can't, and nor do you need to move on from him because he can still play at a high enough level for stretches and periods of time that you can win a lot of games with him, and in some cases still because of him. So, whatever he does, if he wants to play, then obviously the Saints, I would think, are going to be more than happy to oblige him in 2020. But what will be interesting for this team got a little bit of contributions out of their draft class in Eric McCoy and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but not a lot outside of them. Both of those guys at least played in all 16 games and look like future starters for him. This is a team that doesn't have a lot of cap space. Got a little over $12 million. In the meantime, they got to figure out what they're going to do with Drew Brees, what they might have to do with other guys like A.J. Klein and Eli Apple, Andrus Peat. I think P.J. Williams is a free agent. But then you look at the other quarterbacks on the roster, Teddy Bridgewater, Taysom Hill. Are you realistically going to be able to keep all three of those guys? And if so, how are you actually going to be able to make that happen? And in particular, the Taysom Hill conversation and the contract negotiations is going to be really fascinating to me because how do you establish his true value? What exactly is the market for a guy like him? If anything, though, I hope other teams look at what the Saints have done with Taysom Hill, and say, we could have a slash type of guy like that. Somebody that could be the third quarterback, but we don't eat up a roster spot on just a third-string quarterback. He could do some wide receiver stuff. He could play on special teams. He could play in running back. My hope is that what the Saints have done with Taysom Hill actually carries over to more teams throughout the National Football League. But what they're going to do here with Brees, with Bridgewater, I don't know. Like, Teddy certainly made himself a lot of money when he went 5-0 as a starter this year. But you got to think if Drew Brees wants to play, you got to keep Drew Brees first. That's the priority. And whatever happens with Teddy, you let the chips fall where they may. Heading into this offseason and into the draft, they'll obviously have some tough decisions to make there. And then when it comes to the draft, you've got pick 24 in round number 1. Their third round, fourth round, fifth round, sixth round picks. Not a ton of draft pick capital to work with. I still think some needs. Starting off on that defense. That defense was a little bit vulnerable this year, specifically against the pass, I should say. I think they need some help on that defensive line. I certainly think they could use another corner, and even if they keep Eli Apple, but especially if they do not. That linebacking core, Demario Davis had a great year, but they feels like they could use some upgrades there as well. On the offensive side of the ball, I would like to see them get a wide receiver, a younger option opposite of Michael Thomas, and then possibly a tight end that could be the long-term answer there to replace Jared Cook. It's not a team with a ton of true needs. I think most of the needs come on the defensive side of the ball. But I just got to wonder again, man. Like, regardless of what they do in the offseason, who they keep, who they sign, what they do in the draft, is it really going to matter all that much? Because at some point in time, all this bad mojo of the bad luck in the playoffs has to catch up with them, doesn't it?